The easiest way to discover a person's character is to give them power and an audience. Nathan Whitmore learned that lesson on a rainy Thursday evening, though not in the way he expected. The city lights shimmered against the wet sidewalks of Manhattan as black luxury sedans lined the curb outside Loran House, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the Upper East Side. Inside, crystal chandeliers reflected warm gold across polished marble floors while the soft sound of piano music drifted through the dining room. Every table was occupied. CEOs, investors, attorneys, people who measured success in acquisitions, stock valuations, and private jets. Nathan fit perfectly among them. At 38, he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars and carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never been told no for very long. His tailored navy suit looked effortless. His Swiss watch caught flashes of chandelier light each time he raised his hand. Around his table sat four longtime friends, equally successful, equally competitive. The conversation flowed easily until someone noticed the waitress approaching with a tray of sparkling water. "There she is," one of them said. Nathan glanced up casually, then paused. The waitress moved through the crowded dining room with unusual calm. No rushing. No nervous energy. No forced smile. Just quiet professionalism. Her name tag read Claire Bennett. Blonde hair neatly tied back. Crisp uniform. Steady eyes. She placed glasses in front of the table one by one with practiced precision. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said. "Welcome back." Her voice was warm but measured. Nathan barely acknowledged her before turning back to the table. "You know what's funny?" his friend Logan said. "People reveal everything when they think they need something from you." A few chuckles followed. Nathan leaned back in his chair. "That's because most people do need something." Logan pointed toward Claire as she served another table nearby. "What about her?" Nathan followed his gaze. Claire was helping an elderly couple understand the menu. Patient, attentive, completely focused. "What about her?" Nathan asked. Logan grinned. "I bet you couldn't make her lose her cool." The table laughed. Nathan smirked. "That's easy." "No," Logan replied. "Not just annoyed. I mean genuinely lose her composure." Nathan glanced toward Claire again. She thanked the couple and moved away. Calm, collected, unbothered. Something about that confidence caught his attention. "How much?" Nathan asked. $500, Logan said immediately. "1,000, another friend added. "And dessert hasn't even arrived yet." The men laughed. Nathan extended his hand. "Deal." Across the room, Claire picked up a fresh pot of coffee and continued her work, completely unaware that a wager had just been placed with her dignity at the center of it. Outside, rain tapped softly against the tall windows. Inside, Nathan checked the time on his watch and smiled. To him, it was harmless entertainment. A game, a challenge, another opportunity to prove he understood people better than anyone else at the table. What Nathan did not know was that some people could not be measured by money, pressure, or pride. And before the evening was over, before the dessert menus even touched the table, the millionaire who thought he was running the test would begin to realize he was the one being revealed. Claire Bennett had learned long ago that the quickest way to survive a crowded dining room was to stop making every customer the center of her world. She treated everyone the same. The young couple splitting an appetizer, the attorney reviewing contracts between courses, the retired teacher celebrating a birthday, the millionaire sitting beneath a crystal chandelier, wearing a watch worth more than her annual rent. They all received the same calm smile, the same careful attention, the same respect. She moved through Loran House with quiet efficiency, balancing a tray across one hand while checking orders with the other. The restaurant was busy tonight. Every table occupied, every server moving twice as fast as normal. Yet Claire never seemed rushed. She carried herself with the steady confidence of someone who understood that panic only created more mistakes. Near the service station, another waitress exhaled heavily as she stacked empty glasses. "Table 12 is driving me crazy," she whispered. Claire glanced over. The anniversary couple? No. The businessmen by the windows. Claire followed her gaze and immediately spotted Nathan Whitmore's table. They were laughing, watching the room more than their menus. One of them pointed briefly in her direction before turning back to the conversation. Claire looked away without reacting. "Just keep smiling," she said softly. "Eventually they will get distracted by dessert." The other waitress laughed despite herself. "How do you stay so calm?" Claire considered the question for a moment. Then she shrugged. Most people are carrying something you cannot see. It was an answer she genuinely believed. Years earlier, she might have judged customers. Their arrogance, their impatience, their assumptions. Life had taught her otherwise. People often revealed their fears disguised as confidence, their loneliness disguised as status, their insecurity disguised as control. Across the dining room, Nathan watched as Claire helped an elderly man unfold his reading glasses after they slipped from his pocket. She smiled, said something that made him laugh. Then she continued on without lingering. No performance, no expectation of praise, just kindness. Nathan frowned slightly. Interesting, he muttered. Logan noticed. Already studying the competition? I am studying a waitress. That sounds exactly like someone studying the competition. The table chuckled. Nathan ignored them. Something felt unusual about Claire. Most servers adjusted their behavior around wealth. Some became overly attentive, others visibly nervous. Claire seemed unaffected. If she recognized him, she did not care. If she did not recognize him, she certainly was not trying to find out. That bothered him more than he expected. A few minutes later, Claire returned carrying a fresh basket of artisan bread. Can I answer any questions about the menu? She asked. Nathan looked up. Actually, yes. Claire waited patiently. What is the most expensive thing here? She blinked once. The imported Wagyu tasting selection. And what is the best thing? For the first time, a faint smile touched her face. That depends on whether you are trying to impress someone or enjoy your dinner. Logan nearly choked on his water. The table erupted with laughter. Nathan managed a smile. Small, controlled, but genuine. Claire simply handed out the bread plates and moved on. As she disappeared into the crowd, Nathan glanced down at his Swiss watch. The game suddenly felt less predictable than it had 20 minutes earlier. And for the first time that evening, he found himself wondering whether he had chosen the wrong person to underestimate. The appetizers arrived beneath a soft glow of chandelier light, while rain continued to streak across the tall windows overlooking Madison Avenue. Around the dining room, conversations blended into a low hum of wealth and ambition. Deals were being discussed, partnerships negotiated, futures measured in percentages and projections. At Nathan Whitmore's table, however, attention had shifted toward a different objective. Logan leaned forward with a grin. You are losing. Nathan cut into a crab cake appetizer without looking up. The game barely started. You already tried charm. She survived. Another friend laughed. Maybe she is immune to billionaires. Millionaires, Nathan corrected automatically. And nobody is immune to anything. Yet even as he said it, he was not entirely convinced. Claire Bennett had handled every interaction with the same quiet confidence. No nervous laughter. No exaggerated politeness. No visible irritation. It was unusual. Nathan was accustomed to reading people quickly. Investors, competitors, negotiators. Most revealed themselves within minutes. Claire remained frustratingly difficult to categorize. As if sensing the table needed attention, she appeared beside them carrying a silver pitcher. May I refresh anyone's water? She asked. Nathan glanced at his nearly full glass. Then an idea formed. Small, harmless, exactly the kind of test he excelled at. Actually, he said, I have a special request. Claire waited. Of course. Nathan pointed toward his glass. I only drink water with exactly 3 ice cubes. The table immediately went silent. Logan lowered his head to hide a smile. Claire looked at the glass, then at Nathan. 3. Exactly 3. She nodded thoughtfully. Would 4 create an emergency? A few nearby guests chuckled. Nathan smiled. Possibly. Then we should avoid unnecessary risk. Without another word, Claire lifted the glass and walked away. Logan burst out laughing. That was your plan? Be patient. 2 minutes later, she returned. She set the glass in front of Nathan. 3 ice cubes floated quietly inside. Nothing more. Nothing less. Anything else I can do for you? She asked. Nathan studied the glass, then shook his head. Not right now. Claire smiled politely and moved on. The table erupted. She actually did it. That is unbelievable. Nathan stared after her. Most people would have rolled their eyes or shown annoyance. Claire had treated the ridiculous request exactly the same way she would handle a serious one. Not because she was submissive, because she seemed completely uninterested in being emotionally controlled by it. Across the room, Claire stopped beside a service station and picked up a coffee mug that had long gone cold. She took a brief sip while reviewing orders. No complaints, no gossip, no dramatic reaction, just quiet focus. Nathan noticed. There, Logan said. She is drinking cold coffee. So, that means she has been working nonstop for hours. Nathan watched her for another moment. The coffee looked terrible, yet she drank it anyway before immediately returning to help a family celebrating a graduation dinner. Something about the image lingered in his mind. The cold coffee, the calm expression, the complete absence of self-pity. Interesting, he murmured. Logan rolled his eyes. You keep saying that. Nathan checked his watch. The evening was moving faster than expected. And despite winning negotiations worth millions of dollars throughout his career, he was beginning to suspect that convincing Claire Bennett to lose her composure might prove far more difficult than any business deal he had ever closed. The main course arrived with perfect timing. Plates of steak, seafood, and carefully arranged vegetables settled across the table while the piano shifted into a slower melody. Around them, the restaurant maintained its elegant rhythm. Glasses clinked softly. Conversations rose and fell. Rain continued tapping against the windows like a distant metronome. Nathan cut into his dinner, but found his attention wandering. Not to the food. To Claire. She was helping a young father calm an embarrassed little boy who had accidentally spilled lemonade across the tablecloth. No frustration. No forced smile. Just patience. Within moments the child was smiling again. The parents looked relieved. Claire quietly replaced the linens and disappeared before they could thank her properly. You are doing it again, Logan said. Nathan looked up. Doing what? Watching her. The others laughed. Nathan ignored them. I am observing. That sounds worse. Another round of laughter followed. Nathan glanced at his watch. Less than an hour remained before dessert service. If he intended to win the bet, he needed something more creative. Something that would expose a weakness. Everyone had one. Across the room, Claire approached carrying a leather check presenter. She stopped at a nearby table where three executives appeared deep in discussion. One of them pointed sharply at the receipt. Even from a distance, Nathan could tell there was confusion about the bill. Claire listened carefully. She nodded once, then calmly explained something while reviewing the itemized charges. Within seconds, the tension disappeared. The men thanked her. One even laughed. Nathan narrowed his eyes. Most people became defensive when questioned. Claire seemed to become calmer, as if pressure only sharpened her focus. A few minutes later, she returned to Nathan's table. How is everything this evening? She asked. Excellent, Logan answered. Dangerously excellent. Claire smiled politely. I will let the chef know. Nathan folded his napkin. Actually, I have a question. Of course. If someone offered you $10,000 right now, but you had to quit your job tonight, would you do it? The table immediately fell silent. Claire blinked once. The question hung in the air. Nathan expected surprise, curiosity, maybe irritation. Instead, she considered it thoughtfully. No. The answer arrived so quickly that Nathan almost thought he misheard. No. No. You would turn down $10,000? Yes. Nathan leaned back. Why? Claire glanced around the dining room. Because if someone offers you money to make a decision quickly, they are usually benefiting more than you are. Logan laughed so hard, he nearly spilled his drink. Nathan stared at her. You came up with that immediately? No. Claire said softly. Life taught it to me. Then she excused herself and moved toward another table. The conversation remained suspended long after she left. Nathan looked down at his untouched glass. For the first time all evening, he felt something unfamiliar. Not annoyance. Not amusement. Respect. It arrived quietly. Uninvited. Like the rain outside. And that realization bothered him far more than losing a simple wager ever could. The evening continued moving forward, but something had shifted at Nathan Whitmore's table. The laughter was still there. The expensive wine still flowed. Yet Nathan found himself paying less attention to the people seated around him and more attention to the woman moving quietly through the restaurant. Claire Bennett seemed to exist outside the usual rules that govern social status. She treated a hedge fund manager and a retired schoolteacher exactly the same. She gave the same smile, the same patience, the same respect. It was almost unsettling. Most people adjusted their behavior depending on who was watching. Claire did not. Near the service station, she reviewed several orders while balancing a tray on one hand. A young busboy accidentally dropped a stack of folded napkins beside her. The boy immediately turned red with embarrassment. Nathan watched from across the room. He expected frustration, a lecture, perhaps a visible sigh. Instead, Claire crouched down and helped gather the napkins. "Nobody got hurt," she said gently. "That means it is still a good night." The boy smiled with obvious relief. 30 seconds later, she was back to work as if nothing had happened. Nathan leaned back slowly. "She does that every time." Logan looked up. "Does what?" "Makes everything look easy." "Maybe it is easy." Nathan shook his head. "No, it is not." For reasons he could not explain, he suddenly remembered his first year building his company. Long nights, constant uncertainty, employees depending on him, every mistake feeling larger than life. Back then he had admired people who remained calm under pressure. Somewhere along the way, he had become more impressed by confidence than character. Claire seemed to possess both. The realization irritated him, not because she had done anything wrong, because she continued dismantling assumptions he did not realize he carried. A few minutes later, she approached the table again. "Can I clear these plates?" she asked. Nathan nodded. Then, almost impulsively, he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a crisp $100 bill on the table. "For the busboy," he said. "Because of the napkins." Claire glanced at the bill, then at Nathan. "That is generous." "You seem surprised." "Not surprised." She carefully collected the dishes. "Just curious." "About what?" Claire balanced the plates with practiced precision. "Whether you did it for him or for yourself." The question landed softly, yet it hit harder than any challenge Logan had thrown at him all evening. Nathan opened his mouth, then stopped. Claire offered a polite smile and walked away before he could answer. Across the table, Logan nearly fell out of his chair laughing. "That is twice." "Twice what?" Nathan asked. "Twice she has left you speechless." Nathan looked down at the untouched bill still resting on the table. For the first time in years, he found himself genuinely questioning his own motives. Outside, the rain had begun to ease. Inside, the restaurant felt warmer than before. Claire returned to the service station, picked up her now-cold coffee, and took another sip without complaint. Nathan watched her for a moment longer. The bet was still technically alive. Dessert had not arrived. But deep down, he was beginning to suspect that he had already lost something far more important than $1,000. The dining room had settled into that rare moment between courses when everything seemed to slow down. Empty plates had disappeared. Conversations softened. The rain outside had faded to a gentle mist, leaving the city glowing beyond the tall windows. Claire Bennett moved through the restaurant carrying a tray of coffee cups while the scent of fresh espresso drifted through the air. At Nathan Whitmore's table, however, silence had become unusually common. His friends noticed it. Nathan noticed it. Every time Claire walked away, she seemed to leave behind another question he could not immediately answer. Logan swirled the last sip of wine in his glass. "You know what your problem is?" Nathan looked up. "I am sure you are about to tell me." "You expected this to be easy." The others nodded. Nathan did not argue, because it was true. He had built companies by identifying leverage points. Every negotiation had pressure. Every person had a weakness. Yet Claire remained frustratingly difficult to read. She was not impressed by money. She was not intimidated by confidence. And she never seemed interested in proving anything. Across the room, a distinguished older gentleman entered the restaurant carrying a worn umbrella. Claire spotted him immediately. Her face brightened in a way Nathan had not seen all evening. Not excitement. Recognition. Respect. She walked directly toward him. "Good evening, Mr. Walker." The elderly man smiled warmly. "Claire, working too hard again. Somebody has to keep this place running." The man laughed. Nathan watched as she guided him to a small corner table. No special treatment. No attention-seeking display. Just genuine kindness. A few minutes later, curiosity got the better of him. When Claire returned to refill water glasses, Nathan nodded toward the older gentleman. "Friend of yours?" Claire followed his gaze. "Something like that." "Family?" "No." She adjusted a napkin at the edge of the table. "He was my high school history teacher." Nathan blinked. "You still keep in touch with your history teacher?" "Once a month." "Why?" Claire seemed surprised by the question. "Because he showed up when nobody else did." Her answer arrived quietly. Simple. Honest. Then she moved on before Nathan could ask anything else. The words lingered. Because he showed up when nobody else did. Nathan stared at his reflection in the water glass. His mind drifted unexpectedly through years of board meetings, investor calls, and business dinners. Hundreds of names. Hundreds of contacts. yet very few people he would call simply because they mattered. Across the room, Mr. Walker and Claire shared a brief conversation. The older man laughed. Claire smiled. Then she returned to work. Logan noticed Nathan watching again. What now? Nathan shook his head slowly. I think we have been measuring success wrong. The table erupted with exaggerated groans. Now she is changing your philosophy. Logan said. One waitress. Nathan almost laughed. But something stopped him. Because deep down he was beginning to understand what made Claire different. It was not intelligence. It was not confidence. It was not even kindness. It was consistency. She treated every person as if they mattered before they proved they deserved it. And for a man who had spent years deciding who was worth his time, that realization felt unexpectedly heavy. Near the service station, Claire picked up her coffee mug once more. The coffee was cold. It had probably been cold for an hour. Yet she smiled anyway. Nathan glanced at his expensive Swiss watch. Dessert service would begin soon. The bet remained unfinished. But for the first time all evening, he found himself hoping nobody at the table would mention it. Dessert menus began appearing across the dining room like a signal that the evening was entering its final act. The energy inside Laurent House had softened. Business conversations were winding down. Families lingered over coffee. The piano played something slow and familiar. Nathan Whitmore sat quietly, watching Claire Bennett move from table to table with the same steady rhythm she had maintained all night. No shortcuts, no visible fatigue, no change in attitude. The bet should have been forgotten by now. Yet Logan was not ready to let it go. You have one chance left, he said. Nathan looked up. One chance for what? To win. Nathan almost laughed. I do not think anyone is winning tonight. That sounds suspiciously like surrender. The table chuckled. Nathan glanced toward Claire. She was helping an elderly couple select dessert. Patient as always. What exactly do you expect me to do? He asked. Logan leaned forward. You said everyone has a price. Nathan immediately regretted the words, because the version of himself that had said them now felt distant, younger, less thoughtful. Yet before he could respond, Claire appeared beside the table carrying a tray of coffee refills. Would anyone care for fresh coffee? She asked. Nathan looked at the mug in her hand. The same mug she had been drinking from all evening. The same cold coffee. Somehow she had never found time to replace it. An idea formed. Not a trap. Not exactly. More of a test. One final attempt to understand her. Claire, he said. She turned toward him. Yes. Nathan removed a business card from his jacket and placed it carefully on the table. I own several companies in the city. Claire glanced at the card but made no move to pick it up. Congratulations. Logan nearly laughed out loud. Nathan ignored him. I am serious. I can tell. If someone offered you a position tomorrow that paid 5 times what you earn here, would you take it? Claire studied him for a moment. Not suspiciously. Thoughtfully. Then her eyes moved briefly toward the corner table where Mr. Walker was finishing his coffee. She looked toward the kitchen where the young busboy was carrying dishes. Then toward an older hostess greeting guests at the front door. Finally, she returned her attention to Nathan. That depends. On what? Nathan asked. Who I would become to earn it. Silence settled over the table. Even Logan stopped smiling. Claire's voice remained calm. Money changes your life. She lifted the coffee pot slightly. But character determines whether the change is an improvement. Nathan stared at her. The answer was not rehearsed. It was not clever for the sake of being clever. It sounded lived. Earned. True. Claire offered a polite smile. Will anyone be having dessert this evening? Nobody answered immediately. The entire table seemed caught in the gravity of a conversation that had somehow become larger than itself. Claire waited patiently. Then one by one, dessert orders were placed. Chocolate souffle, cheesecake, apple tart. She wrote everything down carefully. Thank you, gentlemen. As she walked away, Nathan noticed something he had missed all night. Claire never once tried to impress anyone. And somehow, that made her the most impressive person in the room. The desserts arrived on polished white plates, each one carefully arranged beneath the warm glow of the chandeliers. Chocolate souffle, New York cheesecake, apple tart topped with cinnamon. The dining room seemed softer now, wrapped in the comfortable satisfaction that comes at the end of a long evening. Claire Bennett moved from table to table, delivering the final course with the same attention she had shown every guest since the beginning of her shift. Nothing about her pace had changed. Nothing about her attitude had changed. Yet something inside Nathan Whitmore had. As Claire placed the last dessert in front of his table, Logan leaned back and folded his arms. "Well," he said quietly, "that is it." Nathan glanced at him. "What is?" "The end of the bet." Nathan looked down at the chocolate soufflé in front of him. For several seconds he said nothing. The wager that had seemed amusing earlier now felt strangely embarrassing. Not because he had lost, because he could no longer remember why winning had mattered. Across the room, Claire stopped near the service station and finally poured herself a fresh cup of coffee. Nathan noticed immediately. No more cold coffee. For the first time all evening, she had found a moment for herself. The sight made him smile unexpectedly. Logan caught it. "You are definitely different." "Maybe." "No. Definitely." Nathan laughed softly. "You know what bothers me?" "What?" "I spent 3 hours trying to figure out what you wanted." Logan raised an eyebrow. "And?" Nathan watched Claire thank a departing family near the entrance. "I do not think she wants anything." The words settled over the table. Nobody argued, because they had all seen the same thing throughout the evening. Claire had never angled for attention, never tried to impress anyone, never adjusted her behavior around wealth. She simply showed up, did her work, treated people well, then repeated the process. A few minutes later, an unexpected moment occurred. Mr. Walker, the retired history teacher, stood from his table preparing to leave. As he approached the entrance, he stopped beside Claire and handed her a folded envelope. Claire immediately shook her head. "No," the older man smiled. "Yes." "Mr. Walker." "Claire." Their expressions mirrored each other. Stubborn but kind. Finally, Claire accepted the envelope. Nathan watched as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. Nothing more. No money. No gift card. No reward. Just a note. Claire read it silently, then pressed the paper gently against her chest for a moment before carefully placing it inside her apron pocket. Her eyes glistened slightly beneath the restaurant lights. Not from sadness, from gratitude. Mr. Walker squeezed her shoulder and walked toward the door. Nathan found himself staring at the scene. "What do you think it said?" Logan asked quietly. Nathan shook his head. "Something valuable." "How do you know?" Nathan glanced toward the entrance where the older man disappeared into the night, then back toward Claire, because she looked at it the same way most people look at a winning lottery ticket. Across the room, Claire resumed her work exactly as before. No dramatic reaction, no announcement, just quiet appreciation. And in that moment Nathan understood something he had completely missed at the beginning of the evening. The richest person inside Laurent House might not have been sitting at his table after all. The evening should have been ending, yet Nathan Whitmore found himself more curious than he had been at the beginning of the night. Most of the tables were finishing dessert. A few guests were already gathering coats and umbrellas. The soft piano music continued drifting through the dining room, while city lights shimmered beyond the rain-speckled windows. Claire Bennett was clearing plates near the service station when a small leather-bound notebook slipped from beneath a stack of menus. It landed on the counter beside her. Nathan only noticed because she reacted differently than usual. Not dramatically, just carefully. She picked up the notebook and opened it for a brief moment before placing it safely inside a drawer beneath the register. The motion lasted only seconds. Yet something caught his attention. Later, when Claire disappeared briefly into the kitchen, the restaurant manager approached the station looking for a reservation ledger. He opened the same drawer. For an instant, the notebook became visible again. Nathan was too far away to read much, but he noticed enough. The pages were filled with handwritten notes. Not restaurant orders. Not schedules. Something else. Lists. Observations. Ideas. The manager smiled when he saw it. "Still working on that?" he asked when Claire returned. Claire glanced toward the notebook. "A little. You have been working on it for years." She laughed softly. "Some things take time." The manager shook his head with obvious admiration before walking away. Nathan watched the exchange. Something about it lingered. When Claire came to refill coffee one final time, he nodded toward the drawer. "What is the notebook?" Claire looked briefly surprised. Then she smiled. "A project." "What kind of project?" "The unfinished kind." Nathan expected her to elaborate. She did not. "You are not going to tell me?" "Probably not." "Why?" Claire set down the coffee pot. "Because people tend to value things differently once they know the title." Nathan frowned. "I do not understand." "Exactly." Her smile widened slightly. Then she moved on. 20 minutes later, another clue appeared. A young woman entered the restaurant carrying a backpack stuffed with books. She looked no older than 20. The moment she saw Claire, her face brightened. They spoke briefly near the entrance. The young woman handed Claire a thick manuscript secured with rubber bands. Claire accepted it carefully, almost reverently. Nathan noticed the cover page. There was a title. There was also a name. Claire Bennett. His eyes narrowed. The manuscript looked substantial. Hundreds of pages. The young woman hugged Claire before leaving. Not the hug of a customer. The hug of someone grateful. Logan noticed Nathan staring. What now? Nathan pointed subtly toward the manuscript. Did you see that? Logan glanced over. A stack of paper? No, Nathan sat back slowly. Something does not add up. Throughout the entire evening, he had assumed Claire was simply a waitress. Yet every new detail painted a larger picture. The notebook, the manuscript, the teacher who still visited, the quiet confidence, the complete lack of interest and status. For the first time, Nathan began to suspect that the apron told only a fraction of her story. And somehow, that realization made him feel smaller than any answer ever could. By now, most of the guests had left. The dining room that had once buzzed with conversations and laughter now felt quieter, almost reflective. A few candles still flickered on distant tables. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the city beyond the windows washed clean and glowing beneath the streetlights. Nathan Whitmore should have been preparing to leave as well. Instead, he found himself watching Claire Bennett organize receipts near the service station. The manuscript remained beside her. So did the worn notebook. Neither looked like hobbies. They looked like commitments. The kind that survive exhaustion. The kind people protect. Logan noticed Nathan staring again and shook his head. You are never going to let this go, are you? Nathan smiled faintly. Probably not. Before Logan could respond, the restaurant manager approached Claire carrying a small stack of mail that had arrived earlier in the evening. Most of it looked ordinary. Utility envelopes. Business correspondence. Then one letter caught Nathan's attention. The manager handed it to Claire with a grin. Looks official. Claire immediately recognized the return address. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. She opened the envelope carefully. Read the first page. Then closed her eyes for a brief second. Good news? The manager asked. Claire nodded slowly. I think so. You think so? He laughed. What does that mean? Claire looked down at the letter again. It means they accepted the proposal. Nathan watched the exchange closely. Proposal for what? The manager asked. Claire hesitated. The literacy program. The manager froze. The citywide one. Claire nodded. Looks like it. For the first time all evening, the manager seemed genuinely stunned. Claire, that program could help thousands of students. She offered a modest smile. Hopefully. Then she folded the letter and slipped it into her notebook as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Nathan stared across the room. Literacy program. Proposal. Manuscript. Notebook. The puzzle pieces were finally beginning to connect. A few minutes later, Claire approached the table one final time. Can I bring anything else before the kitchen closes? Nathan looked at her differently now. Not as a waitress. Not as a mystery. As someone whose life clearly extended far beyond the walls of this restaurant. The literacy program, he said quietly. Claire paused. What about it? You wrote the proposal? Yes. For the city? Yes. Nathan leaned back slowly. And you work here full-time? Claire nodded. Most weeks. Why? The question escaped before he could stop it. Claire seemed to consider her answer. Because meaningful work and necessary work are not always the same thing. The table fell silent. She continued softly. Sometimes one pays the bills while the other builds the future. Nathan felt those words settle somewhere deeper than he expected. For years he had measured success through growth charts, acquisitions, and quarterly reports. Yet standing in front of him was a woman spending her nights serving tables while quietly creating opportunities for people she might never meet. Claire offered a polite smile. Anything else? Nathan looked at the business card he had placed on the table earlier, then at the manuscript beside the service station, then back at Claire. No, he said honestly. I think you have already given me more than enough to think about. The restaurant was nearly empty now. Chairs remained occupied at only a handful of tables. The piano had fallen silent. Employees moved through their closing routines with the quiet efficiency that comes at the end of a long shift. Nathan Whitmore sat motionless, his untouched coffee cooling beside him. Hours earlier he had arrived expecting entertainment. Now he found himself questioning assumptions he had carried for years. Across the room, Claire Bennett carefully organized receipts, reservation cards, and closing paperwork. The manuscript rested beside her notebook. The acceptance letter remained tucked safely inside its pages. She looked exactly the same as she had when the evening began. Calm, focused, unchanged. Nathan realized that while everyone else had been transformed by the night, Claire had simply remained herself. Logan checked his phone and stood. I should get going. The others followed. Jackets were collected. Goodbyes exchanged. Yet before leaving, Logan paused beside Nathan. For what it is worth, I have never seen you lose this badly. Nathan smiled faintly. I know. The funny part. Logan adjusted his coat. You seem happy about it. Then he walked away. Nathan remained seated. Alone now. Across the room, Claire approached with the final check presenter. Whenever you are ready, she said. Nathan accepted it, but did not open it immediately. Instead, he looked up. Can I ask you one last question? Claire nodded. You can ask. Will you answer? A small smile appeared. That depends on the question. Nathan glanced toward the manuscript. If your program succeeds, if the book gets published, if everything works out exactly the way you hope, what do you want in return? Claire seemed genuinely surprised. She thought for a moment, then looked around the quiet restaurant. Nothing. Nathan frowned. That cannot be true. Why not? Because everyone wants something. Claire folded her hands lightly in front of her apron. Most people want to matter. Nathan waited. And? She smiled softly. I already do. The answer settled over the room like still water. No arrogance. No self-congratulation. Just certainty. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are. Nathan lowered his eyes. For the first time all evening, he felt embarrassed by the wager. By the assumptions. By the quiet arrogance hidden beneath his curiosity. He reached into his wallet and removed the business card he had offered hours earlier. Then he tore it in half and placed the pieces inside his jacket pocket. Claire noticed, but said nothing. You know, Nathan said quietly, I spent the entire evening trying to figure out what made you different. Claire tilted her head slightly. And did you? Nathan nodded. You are not trying to become someone important. Claire's smile widened. That saves a lot of time. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Claire picked up the check presenter and placed it gently on the table. Have a safe trip home, Mr. Whitmore. As she turned away, Nathan realized something that no business victory had ever taught him. The strongest person in a room is often the one who has nothing to prove. And before the night was over, that lesson would become impossible to forget. The last guests drifted out into the night one by one until Lauren House stood almost empty. The chandeliers still glowed overhead, but their light now reflected across vacant tables and neatly arranged chairs instead of crowded conversations. The evening had finally reached its quiet conclusion. Nathan Whitmore signed the check and placed the folder on the table. For several moments he remained seated, listening to the distant sounds of closing duties echoing softly from the kitchen. Somewhere nearby, dishes were being stacked, glasses polished. Another day ending. Across the room, Claire Bennett continued working as if nothing extraordinary had happened. She gathered menus, balanced receipts, organized paperwork. The same calm rhythm she had carried from the first hour of her shift remained completely unchanged. Nathan watched her for a long moment. Then something caught his attention. Near the service station stood a bulletin board covered with community announcements. Most were ordinary. Charity events, school fundraisers, volunteer programs. Yet one flyer immediately stood out. At the center was a photograph. Claire, younger, dressed in professional business attire. Beside her stood several city officials and educators. Above the photograph, a headline read, Community Literacy Initiative Wins State Recognition. Nathan slowly stood and walked closer. Beneath the article was a brief description of the program's founder. Claire Bennett, educational advocate, author, community organizer. The same woman who had spent the evening carrying trays and refilling water glasses. Nathan stared at the article, then at the manuscript resting near the register, then back at the photograph. Suddenly, every puzzle piece fell into place. The notebook, the proposal, the teacher, the manuscript, the confidence, the complete absence of ego. Claire had never been hiding her accomplishments. She simply had not built her identity around them. You found it. Nathan turned. Claire stood nearby holding a stack of folded napkins. Her expression remained calm. Nathan glanced back toward the article. Why did you never mention any of this? Claire followed his gaze. Nobody asked. I asked a lot of questions. You asked about jobs. A small smile appeared. Not purpose. Nathan laughed softly despite himself. The truth landed harder than any criticism could have. Hours earlier he had assumed he understood her because he understood her occupation. He had reduced a person to a uniform, a role, a title. The exact mistake he spent his career accusing others of making. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. Claire tilted her head. For what? For arriving here convinced I could measure your value within 5 minutes. For the first time that evening, Claire seemed genuinely thoughtful. Then she smiled. Most people do that. Does it bother you? Nathan asked. Only when it bothers them later. The answer struck him immediately, because now it did bother him. Deeply. Not because she had embarrassed him, because she had revealed something about himself that he had not wanted to see. The restaurant grew quiet again. Claire set the napkins down and picked up her manuscript. Nathan glanced at his expensive Swiss watch. Earlier that evening, he had checked it constantly. Timing deals, tracking the bet, measuring progress. Now it felt strangely unimportant. Claire noticed his expression and smiled. Long night. Very. Worth it. Nathan looked around the nearly empty restaurant. Then at the woman he had underestimated from the moment he walked through the door. Finally he nodded. More than you know. The night air felt different when Nathan Whitmore finally stepped outside Laurent House. The rain had stopped hours ago. The streets shimmered beneath the glow of streetlights, and the city seemed quieter than usual, as if New York itself had decided to slow down for a moment. Behind him, through the restaurant windows, he could still see Claire Bennett finishing the last tasks of her shift, stacking menus, organizing receipts, carrying her manuscript beneath one arm. Nothing about her movements suggested victory. Nothing suggested she knew she had changed someone's perspective forever. That was what stayed with Nathan most. She had never tried to teach him a lesson. She had never attempted to prove her worth. She had simply been herself from beginning to end. The following weeks passed quickly. Board meetings returned. Investment calls resumed. Contracts crossed Nathan's desk by the dozen. Yet every so often, his mind drifted back to a waitress with a cold cup of coffee and an unshakable sense of purpose. One afternoon, while reviewing community initiatives his company supported, Nathan paused on a familiar name. Claire Bennett. The literacy program had officially launched. Enrollment numbers were already exceeding expectations. Hundreds of students had signed up. More would follow. Nathan stared at the report for a long moment before quietly approving a grant request that had been waiting for months. No press release. No interviews. No publicity campaign. Just support. The kind Claire herself would have respected. Several months later, he received a package. No return address. Inside was a newly published book. On the cover appeared a familiar name. Claire Bennett. Tucked between the first pages was a handwritten note. It contained only one sentence. Thank you for learning before it was too late. Nathan smiled. Then he placed the note inside the drawer of his desk beside the few things he truly valued. Years later, whenever someone asked him about the most important business lesson he had ever learned, they expected stories about mergers, negotiations, or investments. Instead, he often thought about a restaurant, a rainy evening, a forgotten wager, and a woman who never needed a title to possess dignity. Because the truth was simple. Wealth can open doors. Status can fill rooms. Success can attract attention. But character is the thing people remember long after everything else fades. Claire Bennett understood that from the beginning. Nathan Whitmore learned it one quiet evening over dinner. And perhaps that is why some of the strongest people never need to raise their voices. They simply raise the standard. If this story reminded you of someone whose quiet strength changed a life, share their name in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about dignity, kindness, and the moments that reveal who we truly are, you are always welcome to join us again for the next one.